Hello, welcome. I am Rabbi Matthew Ponak. If we haven't met before, whether online or in person, and I'm delighted to have you join the presentation today, Kabbalah and the 49 Gates, Counting the Omer for Spiritual Growth. We will also be looking at teachings from my new book, The Path of the Sephirot, which is all about the Omer period between Passover and Shavuot, the 49 days of counting which overlap with transformation and repair in the Kabbalistic tradition. So a little bit about today. If sometimes along the way in the presentation, I'm going to be opening it up for a Q&A, or maybe you just have a question or a comment that arises throughout. I have today joining me tech support Emma, who is here to help if you have any issues with technology, and hopefully that can be sorted out. But also, if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please send those to Emma, and she will forward them on to me when it's time. And yeah, we're going to be exploring today. We're going to be going through teachings about Kabbalah, about the tradition of Jewish mysticism, about the Omer counting season, and seeing how this tradition evolves. And finally, what it means to us today. And I'll be sharing at that point teachings from the path of the sephirot. So welcome. Thank you so much for attending today. And we'll be off on our journey, Kabbalah and the 49 Gates, counting the Omer for spiritual growth. So this is the territory we will be getting to, the path of the sephirot. And I'd like to start off with a sample from the preface, which is really about the perspective that today's lecture is coming from, and also the perspective that I generally hold when I teach Jewish mysticism in our era. So it says, there are as many paths as there are people. This book represents one view of the living tradition of Kabbalah. The interpretations, practices, and historical accounts come from many years of my own study and experience. There are other perspectives on all of these teachings, and I am glad for the diversity within this spiritual lineage. Because the words contained in these pages represent but one branch on an enormous and beautiful tree, they stand for a truth as opposed to the truth. I hope in the course of this journey you find practical wisdom and illumination, and that you feel free to absorb, interpret, and embody Kabbalah in a way that is true to your own unique soul. This is the way of the Jewish mystic. There are so many approaches to this material. Today, as well as in the book, I share one perspective that I love and believe is worthy of putting out into the world. In fact, even within myself, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, there are multiple perspectives on topics around spirituality and transformation and beyond. And the point is that this is about learning and engaging. It's about having a personal relationship with the teachings and the practices and seeing what is true for each and every one of you. And from that place, originality, creativity is not just welcome, it's actually part of the tradition of Kabbalah, of being open to receiving not just the ancient, but the new. In fact, in this tradition, there are various perspectives on who is even worthy of learning Kabbalah. You might have heard, probably if you're here, maybe you've heard this, or maybe people who've heard this wouldn't show up, is that you have to be a certain age and a certain gender and have certain amounts of learning before being able to even study Kabbalah. They say 40 years old and a man with a beard and kids, and you have to have mastered every single element of the tradition prior. Maybe you've heard this. Well, obviously, one, I'm not quite 40 yet, you should know. I haven't mastered every single element of the tradition, but I do know within Kabbalah there are other opinions, and those opinions have existed for a long, long time. That in many eras, for many students and many teachers, it was more about, does this resonate? Is this student ready? Is it appropriate to be learning something? And can we do this in a grounded and integrated way? Those are the most important questions, I believe. And the class today, as well as the book Path of the Sephirot is very accessible. It's very grounded. It's not a extremely ecstatic approach to this journey. So it's safe for, I would say, just about all ages and all stages of the journey. In fact, a great Kabbalist who formed the basis for a lot of what we're going to be looking at today, Isaac Luria, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria from the 16th century, he himself started learning Kabbalah at a young age. In fact, he taught for about 2 years, left behind a massive body of work, and died at the age of 38. So it's possible to engage with this at any age and at any stage. What Isaac Luria taught was a mythos, was a mythological understanding of how our whole world began. And as we journey through this creation of the world narrative, we'll be touching base and tapping in eventually to the 49 days and the 49 gates. But in the beginning was the infinite, and the infinite was everywhere. There was no space devoid of this infinite infinity and light, so much so that there was no place for the world itself to exist. And so the first act that the infinite performed was something called tzimtzum, which means contraction. And through a process of first concentrating infinite light into the middle and then withdrawing, there was like an engraving that was formed. And within this infinity came the Halal HaPanui, the formless void, a space in which the world could come into being. Now, there was a massive difference between the infinite light and the formless void. And so, like any good teacher or parent would do, the infinite knew that it could not overwhelm this vacant void, this space in which the world could form. And so rather than simply waving a magic wand and creating the world, there were gradations and there were layers that were formed. And initially, those layers looked something like this, like layers of an onion, layers within layers within layers. These were initially what are called the tree of life, the sephirot. This is how they looked. There was a kind of directness to them. And layer upon layer, the idea was that the divine light would come and would create the world. That was the goal. This physical universe, the earth, all of creation was supposed to form here. And so divine light, infinite light began to enter. And it went through the first 3 layers, no problem. But as you can imagine, if you were trying to fill 10 buckets, and that would mean with one stream of water, that would mean that bucket number 1 on that journey would need to hold all of the water, not just for itself, but for the other ones too. And slowly it would go down and down. And as it happened, the 4th bucket broke from the light and it was overwhelmed. This is what's called shvirat hakelim in Lurianic Kabbalah, the shattering of the vessels. And they came apart. And as a result, the light itself was scattered. So this is the place that the world forms in, a place not of complete wholeness, but a place where there is brokenness. Our world is not complete. As such, each and every one of us becomes a partner in creation. We have a role of building our world, not just physically, but also metaphysically, is the understanding in this form of Kabbalah, through a process called tikun. Tikun means repair, it can mean healing, it can mean transformation. Tikun is a moment when something gets fixed, when something gets healed. The understanding is when a moment of tikkun occurs, it's like one of those sparks of light and one of those shards from the broken vessels goes back to their proper place. And the Kabbalists of this era believed that our world was imperfect because the light and the blessings from the divine realm, from the infinite, were not flowing properly into our world. That if we could imagine that everything in the cosmos, everything in the spiritual worlds were just right, then our world would have a flow leading into it. And so our physical lives, our emotional lives, our social lives, dare I say, our societal lives would be whole. The beginnings of this tikun tradition, contrary to how that term of repair, tikkun olam, is used today, most often in the beginning of where this was really framed in Lurianic Kabbalah, tikkun was about sacred plumbing. It was, there are pipes and valves that are supposed to be clear and are supposed to go from the infinite realm all the way to the finite, like this image you see before you. But unfortunately, the pipes are clogged and the valves are broken. And there's all kinds of a mess that was created when these vessels broke. Many believe that the breaking was part of the creation story. It could be an accident, if you will, but there's a lesson there about the wholeness which can come through delving into and dealing with brokenness and with things that are not right when we first confront them. So to do tikkun in this era meant tikkun, healing, repair of the divine realm. And later, that tikkun, the gathering of the sparks, the gathering of the shards, it had to do with the brokenness and the light that can be found within. That's a more Hasidic turn on all of this. It's not the shards and the light that are somewhere out in the cosmos, but rather inside of each of us, a moment of insight, a moment of emotional healing or awareness, a social connection, an apology that goes really well and things are healed in a relationship. That's a moment of tikkun. That's healing and repair within us, between us, around us. And along with that, it's a healing of our world, of the external reality as well. And this is the adventure of a lifetime. It's the adventure of many lifetimes. It's Kabbalistically, to many, the purpose of our existence is to be partners in rebuilding and repair and healing the world. And when we talk about the 49 gates and the path that's of tikkun, of repair, that's laid out between Passover and Shavuot, these 49 days that are coming very soon, it all, interestingly enough, begins with barley. So the Omer, we're talking about the Omer season and the counting. It begins with this line in the Torah to speak to the children of Israel, God saying to Moses, and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, and you harvest its harvest, you are to bring the premier sheaf, the Omer Reshit, the first sheaf, the first bundle of barley of your harvest to the priest, to the Kohen. So this was a special offering that was brought to the temple or to the tabernacle in order to be offered on the altar. So he, the Kohen, the priest, is to elevate the sheaf, the Omer, before the presence of God for acceptance for you on the morrow of the Sabbath, which means in this context, just after the first night of Passover. The priest is to elevate it. So this is an offering that's brought. And it's not just brought once, it's in fact brought every day, right? You are to number for yourselves from the morrow of the Sabbath, from Passover, the day after, from the day that you bring the elevated sheaf, 7 Sabbaths of days, whole weeks are they to be. So 7 weeks, 7 times 7. It started literally as counting of bundles of barley. Now, I'm a student of not just Bible and sort of Torah, but I'm a student of history as well. And it's interesting considering where this might have started. So it seems to me, and not just me, many, that the Passover a long time ago was a festival around the barley harvest. And so the barley was harvested, probably not all in one day. And there are very strong beliefs in a lot of ancient cultures that if we can control only so much with our personal actions, but if we make an offering, if we do something kind of magical, it can invite blessings in the process to aid us. So we have barley being offered, and it might be to help the barley harvest, but it might also be to help the next harvest, which is the wheat harvest, which happens on the holiday of Shavuot. There are three main harvest festivals: Passover, which is coming up in just about a week or even less. There's Shavuot, which happens at the end of the 49 days of counting. And then there's Sukkot, the final harvest before the rainy season, the winter season. So this starts as 49 days of counting and of offerings, literally. That's where it all begins. And it evolves. You might say that it's drashed. There's no meaning that's added to it, but one of the things that happens is, this is simply this ritual description simply repeated later on in the Torah. You shall count off 7 weeks, very explicit. Start to count the 7 weeks when the sickle is first put to the standing grain. Then you shall observe the Feast of Weeks, aka Shavuot, also called in the Greek Testament Pentecost, which I believe means 50, because it's the 50th day of the counting, for your God, offering your free will contribution as your God has blessed you. Okay, so this is where it starts. And at some point, the temple is no longer standing. So we have in the Talmud a description of what we do when the temple is no longer standing. This is many, many hundreds of years later. It says, it is a mitzvah, it's a commandment to count days. And it is also a mitzvah to count weeks. So traditionally, when people are counting with the Hebrew blessings, they say not just what day it is, but also what week it is. The Gemara notes that in fact, the sages of the study hall of Rav Ashi, an ancient rabbi, counted days and they also counted weeks. Another rabbi, a Maimar, counted days but not weeks. So there's different ways of doing it. The point we're getting to is a Maimar says, there is no longer an Omer offering. We're not bringing this to the temple anymore, so the counting is performed only in commemoration of the temple. It's a remembrance on some level for this particular rabbi living about 1,500 years ago. Therefore, one does not need both days and weeks. The point is that even after the temple's gone, when the barley is no longer being grown in the land of Israel, we have a ritual of counting day by day by day for 49 days. But we still don't have anything about light, anything about sephirot. We get that, a mention of it, several mentions in fact, but in broader detail in the Zohar. Zohar, the magnum opus of medieval Spanish Kabbalah, comes out in the 13th century, and it asks, why 7 weeks? What are these 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuot? To attain being purified by waters of the flowing, gushing river called living waters, the sephirot of Bina. Now, here is a teaching. So Bina is a very lofty, very rarefied, very subtle dimension known as the living waters, known as the divine mother, known as sacred understanding. And it's a belief that the Israelites on Passover, right at the beginning of this, were elevated to this very high level. They were brought out of exile, not only physically, but also spiritually to this very high level, also called the 50th level. And so counting 49 days is about allowing that water, that blessing, that light from beyond to make sure it doesn't have any obstacles on its way down. And so day by day, for 49 days, there's an individual practice or intention that's brought for the sake of healing, for the sake of tikun. So 7 weeks is the amount of time it takes between that great illumination on Passover, the liberation, the freedom, tapping into the upper mother, to the living waters, to allow it to come down. If one arrives pure on this day, on Shavuot, if it all goes well, says the Zohar, and one has not lost count, when he reaches this night, he should delve into Torah and join her. So there's a tradition of studying all night on Shavuot, right? Shavuot is a commemoration of the revelation at Mount Sinai, right? Passover is both a harvest festival and an Exodus festival, a liberation festival, and Shavuot is both a harvest festival and a revelation festival. So it's believed that on Mount Sinai, the revelation, the Torah, the direct connection with God that happened on Shavuot. So the tradition develops to stay up all night and study Torah, really to get oneself in the place to receive everything. So if we do these 49 days, says the Zohar, then we can delve into Torah on Shavuot and join her, to join the Torah, preserving the supernal purity that comes upon him that night, purifying him. And those are the details given. It's not anything more specific than that. And we're sort of honing and we're getting closer and closer to the details. The next leg of the journey on this unfolding of this practice actually has more details than we have today. This is one small section from Isaac Luria's teachings recorded by his student Chaim Vital. And he says, each week is comprised of 7 days. 1 week is from Chesed to Malchut. So these are the lower 7 sephirot. If this isn't making sense quite yet, don't worry. We'll be clarifying all of it. But essentially here, this is the tree of life. And we have the lower 7 sephirot. And each week is one of these. This is Chesed week. The second week is Gevurah week. And within each week, within each sephirah, each divine emanation, we have 7. So within Chesed, we have Chesed of Chesed, and we have Gevurah of Chesed, and each day of each week has a sephirah within the week's theme of that sephirah. So here's where it first comes out in this book. It's called the Pri Etz Chaim. This is the 16th century now, and it's a description of this practice of the 49 days, but in detail, and in fact, so much detail. It gets way more complex, and it's kind of distilled and simplified for most practitioners, because Lurianic Kabbalah is a highly technical system that for most people, most mortals, I will say, including myself, the details can obscure the potential of the practice. It can get too technical for many of us. So we have Chesed within Chesed, and so on until Malchut. Shekhinah happens within Chesed. That's week 1. These are 7 aspects within the first week, which correspond to the 7 days of the first week. So during the counting period, we're sweetening the judgments and negative elements. So the understanding here is that there are judgments, there's negativity that's around. And so each day we have an opportunity to do some of that healing, some of that tikun, some of that repair. And in this era, again, it's the repair of the cosmos primarily. Yes, we are impacted by it personally. It affects us, but the major focus is on what are we doing to help the totality, to help the world through our practice. So we start to get closer and closer to the personal and the experiential. This is the Bnei Yissaschar. He's a 19th century Hasidic master writing in Eastern Europe. And he says about this period of time, in each week, different sparks are clarified from the attributes that fell. So the sparks are, if you will, separated out from the shards, and they are allowed to both go back to their proper place, right? The ones that fell from the shattering of the vessels. Similarly, there are sparks that fall at all times due to our many sins. So personally, I don't walk around talking about our many sins all the time. This is how the Bnei Yissaschar talks. We could think about the world in that way. I prefer to focus more on the positive, but the point is that he's getting into more specifics here. He says, for example, in the attribute of love, of chesed, within a person, right? Within each of us, which is the attribute of chesed, if one loves something which God has warned to distance oneself from. So we can have love or desire for all kinds of things that are not particularly going to serve us or might be really negative, right? We can have feelings, desires, yearnings for all kinds of things. And the Bnei Yissaschar is pointing out that's an example of one of these fallen sparks of light, that we don't need to completely reject that feeling we have. Again, we're not talking about the cosmos right now. We're talking about the feeling within us. We don't need to completely reject it, but we shouldn't just act on it either. There's something there. There's a shard and there's a spark. There's some healing that can happen. So that's tikun in the inside of us. He says, now the elevation of the sparks through a person's action, let's say by counting the Omer, by meditating, by praying, by working through things with a trusted friend or a teacher, right? It occurs by elevating each of the attributes to its source. What that means is if there is something that feels not so good for us, the belief in Hasidism is that it might not show up in such an enlightened way, but if we follow it, if we trace it back, we can find it actually does originate with something very beautiful and remarkable and even holy. So through complete tshuva is how this happens. Tshuva means repentance or return. It's that idea of tracing that feeling back to where it originates. And in Kabbalah and in Chassidut, the place it originates from is the divine realm. In a more everyday sense, one of the factors that exists in every human relationship, more or less, is sometimes we wrong each other, sometimes we offend each other, sometimes we hurt each other. Hopefully it's by accident, sometimes it's intentional. But what do we need to do in order to repair that in the deeper sense? Well, this perspective would say we need to go to the source of it. What happened? If someone is in the wrong and they can own up to that and they can apologize because they actually feel badly about that. And if the other person is open to hearing it, that's returning to the issue. You have to revisit it in some sense in order for it to be repaired. But that gap, that separation that occurred between the people will actually, it can lead to a closer bond through that process of return and repair through tshuva. So in a way, that dynamic that can happen between people can also happen in and of an individual, right? Getting separated out from a part of ourself. It can also happen between us and our world, between us and God, between us and a tradition. So that process is what they would call elevating sparks, of bringing things back to their proper place, the transformation that comes through that. He says, and that which was only a potential point in one of the attributes, right? Something that a spark that had fallen, something that could have been anything. It might not have been rectified, might have been healed, right? It will be rectified by expanding and raising its head. It gets uplifted to become a complete and perfect stature within the person. This is healing. This is becoming whole. So, for example, something that started off in this mindset is like a forbidden love, a desire that wasn't going to serve the whole. It can turn into love of the creator, or you might say divine love. Like we can start with something like that, trace it back, meditate on it, pray about it, reflect upon it, do work. And there's an experience we can have that, oh, that thing which just appeared to me as something kind of broken and misaligned actually has roots in heaven. It has deep connection in the living waters, the source of life. So that works with all of the attributes. And we'll explore that more as we go through. So we're getting nearer and nearer to our contemporary times. And one of the things I want to point out is that this journey of the 49 days of repairing, of doing this healing work, these 7 weeks that we've been looking at, in one sense, is like a journey down. It's about letting the water shine through. It's allowing space for the blessings to flow. We start on that high point, the spiritual blessing that can happen on Passover, the level of Bina, the elation, or just a really, really good night, hopefully. And there's a blessing that if we allow it, if we do that tikun, that repair work day by day, we can allow that to integrate and to come and to have a landing spot in our world, such that on that final day, the day after the 49, the 50th, we can receive some kind of insight, some kind of revelation. That's one way of understanding this path. Another way of understanding this path that's talked about in Hasidism is we get that amazing blessing on Passover night, on day 0, and then we return to ordinary. We're back where we started. It was a wonderful evening, but we're still ourselves. And so now we have 49 days to do 49 different stages of work, so that hopefully by the time we get to Shavuot, by the time we get to that revelation day, day 50, we can be at that holy place, that open place where we can be worthy, or we can be aware of our capacity and able to receive the new light, the insight that comes in on that day of revelation. So in one sense, it's a journey down, and in another sense, it's a journey up. And this is really open. There's no one right way to do it, but the point is it's 49 days of tikun, 49 opportunities to work on different aspects of ourselves, and they build on each other, and they can allow us to come to a place where we can really receive and also be whole and improve. It's a wonderful opportunity, the Omer. So I wanted to take a moment to see if there's any questions, any comments. If you have them, we'll take a sec. Please write them to tech support Emma here. Hopefully you can direct message her, and just send her any comments or questions. We'll just take a minute or two right now to see if anyone wants to share. Okay, it says in the Mishnah, one of the teachings of a child of a great rabbi said, all my life I've grown up amongst the sages, and I've learned nothing better for the body than silence. That it's okay not to speak. So if you don't want to write anything in terms of a question, by all means, you don't need to. But please know you can write to Emma if there's anything that comes through. Here's someone says, is it possible to access the recording, please, to catch her from the start? Yes. Yes, that's a technical question. Wonderful. You can absolutely do that. I have the recording and I'll be sending it out. I don't know exactly which day, but it'll come out. I promise it will be available for viewing. So, hi, Julian. Okay, so we're going to keep on going. And Emma, if you get any other questions, especially content related, by all means, you can pass them along to me during the next part here. So here we have the tree of life, the map of the sephirot. You'll notice this is different than how it looked in the initial stage. When we see in that beginning slide, the onion layers. What we have here is in Lurianic Kabbalah, a map of what was built after the collapse of the initial structure. The initial structure was direct. It was just one after the other after the other. And this, one of the ways of understanding it is every stage has a collecting mechanism, and then a filtering or sorting mechanism, and then it gets to pass it on, and sort of an intermediary mechanism. So this structure itself is meant to be more balanced, because the overwhelm of the system that occurred initially. And so each of these sephirot has a name. Also, you'll notice that the very top three, they're not colored in. They don't play a part in the Omer counting, really. They are not sephirot that broke, nor this invisible sephirah da'at doesn't play a role either. It's the lower seven, and those are the ones where really most of the action is in Kabbalah. These upper parts they're always doing well, but down here, there's things that can get clogged and get in the way. So there's different ways of understanding each of these. There's different ways of translating them, but the first one here is chesed. That means love or loving kindness. It's pretty universally agreed upon. You could also translate chesed loosely as something like expansiveness. It's the light of the divine. It's not the infinite light, but a lower but still beautiful light, a light associated, in fact, with the first day of creation, when God said, "Let there be light." The next one, gevura. Gevura, I translate idiomatically like as boundaries. It literally means, in modern Hebrew, it means courage, but in older Hebrew, it means something like power or strength. It's associated also with judgment. If chesed is a warm embrace and a big yes, gevura is a hand like this and a no. Refined gevura is not anger, it's not wrath, it's not hate. No, it's simple, it's clear, it burns clean. So week 1 is chesed, week 2 is gevura, boundaries. Then we have tiferet, which is harmony. And that harmony can be associated with a sense of peace, a sense of well-being, a whole heart. And it is also associated with being in a place where we can let our chesed and our gevura flow on a personal experiential level. That we might feel a sense of either one, but we might not always be able to let it through necessarily. So tiferet is about that peaceful place, that calm place of harmony where there's a balance between the yes energy and the no energy. We have netzach, and here I translate it as action. It could be translated as eternity or victory, literally. And in the original Kabbalah, let's say of the Zohar, which isn't quite the original, but it's very old, netzach really was a conduit. It didn't have much of a personality, besides it was the conduit for chesed. And in later Kabbalah and Hasidic mysticism, especially, netzach gets associated as has a character, and one way it's understood is as action. Think about a motivation or the capacity to move forward, whether quickly or slowly, but over time, like a deep, deep abiding trust in your sense of accomplishment. Someone who has netzach gets things done, and not in necessarily a hurried way or an anxious way, just a real sense of the unfolding of purpose and accomplishment in the world. Its antipole, hod, which means something like glory or splendor, literally. Here I translate, again, in terms of meaning, as yielding. This is actually a perspective that I learned from one of my teachers, who I'm not sure is here today, but she had signed up. Her name's Mori Yehudis Fishman, and she taught, when I used to live in Boulder, Colorado, she still lives there and teaches, among other things, Kabbalah and Hasidic mysticism. She taught that hod could be yielding, even though in the original Kabbalistic system, it is a conduit also for gevura in this case. So this evolves over time, gets character. And so if netzach is that sense of motivation and moving forward, hod is a sense of waiting and abiding. It's a sense of patience. Is how much can we wait? How much can we be silent when we know that that's what's needed, even when we really want to speak and move forward? So there's a whole week on hod, whole week on yielding. We have Yesod. Yesod, which literally means foundation, but it has to do with a connection point. It is the connection point between Tiferet and that whole upper structure and Malchut Shechina, which comes beneath it. And in the system which I utilize in the path of the sephirot, Yesod is how are we connecting with others? So it's possible, for example, to be extremely wise or enlightened or learned, but not have the capacity developed to really connect with others. It's possible to be in relationship in all kinds of ways. And Yesod is a week where there's a focus on actualizing, using the other sephirot, our relational capacities, our abilities to connect in the highest, deepest ways. Finally, we have Shekhinah, which is receiving. You'll notice that Shekhinah here is this rainbow color. It's a combination. This is the channel, the medium into which all the higher energies flow Kabbalistically. And in this system that's put forward here today and in the path of the Sephirot, Shekhinah is about integration and receiving. The last day of each week is a Shekhinah within day. Shekhinah within Chesed, Shekhinah within Gevura, Shekhinah within Tiferet. It's about coming to a place where we realize that we deserve love. We deserve to be loving. We deserve boundaries, right? It's how can we really receive that? And then finally, it's about stepping into that on that last week of a full week of integration of the previous 42 days. So this is the system. These are the 7 weeks. And within each week, there are 7 days. So it turns out there are many approaches to this practice. I've already shown you many from history, and there's other people today, many, who are writing Omer books, Omer counters. And when thinking about articulating the motivation behind writing the path of the sephirot, what came to mind is understanding I heard a long time ago in a psychology class that our teacher was explaining that today most psychology research is done more in a lab or more with scientific means, but a lot of modern psychology was actually birthed from introspection. So someone like Freud or someone like Jung or someone like Adler, 3 of the great originators of the modern psychological tradition, they shared insights that came in many ways outside of their own research within. And each of them has something valuable to offer because there's different kinds of people out there. And I remember this psychology professor saying, we need more people to do this. We need more people to spend time introspecting and sharing perspectives on, in that case, the mind. So here, this is a product of my own learning and research, both internally and externally, that the path of the sephirot is a particular vantage point, because I believe that the Omer should be a place not just of counting or not just of Hebrew prayers, but also a place of deep contemplation and reflection. And the approach that I take in this is that every day on this track is an opportunity to delve into who we are as people and how we're showing up in the world. Maybe it's a question we can ask ourselves. Maybe there's a task or a practice, but following the Omer, it's like an et ratzon, a good, perfect time, a time of favor for the kind of transformational work that many of us want to be doing anyways. I mean, in the Jewish calendar, there's different focus points. So if we want to be, let's say, apologizing or working on things that are really, we've messed up on, made mistakes on, that's the high holiday season. It happens around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If we want to really cultivate freedom, that's Passover. If we, want to cultivate our silliness and how to transform with joy and in a kind of a ludicrous way, that's Purim. That each of the holidays is like a focal point of something we can be doing any time of year. I mean, we can be taking 7 days to work on how we love ourselves and others any day of the year. But wow, turns out there's a whole week dedicated to that. And we know when we're working on it, there's other people around the world that are working on it too. So it's an et ratzon, it's a time of favor, it's an opportunity. And I wanted to make a contribution to this great practice, this great lineage. So just to show a little zoomed in, another way of understanding the 7 weeks is to say that every single one of the sephirot has this tree of life inside of them. So here's Tiferet in the center here, and it has a whole tree. So that's the week right there. It's like each of those smaller colored in circles is one of the days and one of the pieces of content. If any of you have read my book Embodied Kabbalah, which is behind me as well, it is there. Let's say there's 50,000, 60,000 words in Embodied Kabbalah. The Path of the Sephirot is probably closer to 3,000 words. It's meant to be a much more simple, everyday practice-based manual, something like a calendar. Maybe one day I will put it out as a calendar. Who knows? But the idea here is it's not all of the complexity of the scholarship. Right. I'm very proud of Embodied Kabbalah, and I'm very happy with that. But the Path of the Sephirot is meant to be a useful guide, a moment of reflection that people can take every day. So it's different in that regard. All right. So I'm going to share some samples now from the book. And we have here, this is so we say, right, we count days and we count weeks. That's what it says in the Talmud. So every new week has a full section, right, a page, a reflection on this quality. So for chesed, love, I put expansiveness, opening, generosity. Yes. These attributes define the Kabbalistic dimension of chesed. Associated with the light of the first day of creation, this divine quality is experienced in moments of transcendent spiritual ecstasy, in allowing ourselves to indulge in physical delights, and in everyday acts of kindness. To tap into the energy of chesed, go out of your way to help others and practice giving purely for its own sake. So this is like a little nugget. It's a little fraction of what chesed can be. But you see, yes, chesed is associated with spiritual ecstasy, but it's also chesed to the self, saying yes to ourselves. It's okay to have delight as part of a balanced life. And then also the external, the moral, the ethical, everyday acts of kindness. And in fact, acts of kindness themselves can be transformational. They can bring us to these places of transcendence. You've probably heard stories about this. If not, I mean, there's many stories in multiple traditions about the transformative power of kind actions. So here's it's just a little idea to tap into chesed, essentially be giving. It's the yes energy. So that's a sample of a weekly, every week there's a page on a particular sephirot. And then we have, let's say here's day 15, right, on the journey. So this will be the first day of Tiferet week. So every page has the Hebrew chesed of Tiferet described in transliteration, right? And this week we'll have the yellow for Tiferet, and here we have blue for the chesed. There's also some Kindle versions that are black and white, but the system itself is laid out on the map here. Chesed of Tiferet. So that is loving kindness within harmony. So every page has a little bumper sticker, a little mantra. Love flows from a peaceful heart. Daily contemplation. So this is the practice or the question and reflection. Deep generosity and warmth extend naturally from a state of calm and balance. What stands in the way of your sense of peace and well-being? Take one step towards aligning your inner world, right, towards feeling good, knowing that this helps clear the way to the wellspring of your innate kindness. So that is loving kindness within harmony, a love that flows out of a sense of balance and well-being. I see someone wrote here, I'm thinking we could use the sephirot as a vehicle for growth beyond the Omer period. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is like a focal point for this kind of thing, but really a simple way of doing it, every day of the week is a sephirah. Sunday is chesed day, and that's the day of light. And it actually kind of lines up like the sun. And then Monday is Gevura Day, the day of boundaries. It's, again, this is based on the biblical days of creation, because Monday is when the upper waters and the lower waters are separated, day 2 in the Torah. So separation, Gevura, but it's also, if you have a case of the Mondays, Monday is a day of like often more self-discipline or kind of focusing in on that, of maybe feeling some of the boundaries of the world that are coming our way. But there are opportunities, days of the week, you can do months, you can do anything, anywhere we go. Actually, the sephirot can be understood and related to in our world. This is a particular focus for this period of time. So another sample, we have Gevura of Gevura. That's boundaries within boundaries, day 9 of the Omer. So the mantra is no leads to no. A single act of delayed gratification points you down the road to self-discipline, road of self-discipline. So Gevura is both boundaries without, but it's also boundaries with ourselves. What is a context in which you struggle to set boundaries with yourself? Today's challenge is to do one small self-disciplined action, knowing that your efforts have inertia. One moment of Gevura truly paves the way for another. There's a saying in the Mishnah, a mitzvah leads to a mitzvah, a good deed leads to a good deed. So how can an act of no with ourselves lead to another act of no? How can we start our way down that path? All right, so I'm going to be sharing samples here. This is sort of like the book reading, almost like ritual or formality of this gathering today. So if this is a great time, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat to tech support Emma And I'll just keep on going in the meantime. So the first one, day one, chesed of chesed. It's a beautiful, beautiful permutation. Loving kindness within loving kindness. The gift which keeps on giving. The earth which springs forth life. So the earth is created in the book of Genesis, and then the earth itself springs forth life. That's chesed of chesed, the love that comes out of this love. A gift which keeps on giving. So the daily contemplation is very simple. How does my love inspire others to love? How can my generosity contribute to a larger culture of sharing? How can we act in ways that have positive ripple effects? How can our loving actions impact those around us and encourage them to love as well? Because there's a great deal of healing that we can actualize in our world simply by living in a place of love. We have Yesod of Gevura. So that's connection within boundaries, day 13. A quote from one of my favorite authors, Khalil Gibran, from the book The Prophet. Let there be spaces in your togetherness. This is his chapter on marriage, but it applies beyond that as well. Limitation is an essential ingredient for long-term relationships. Like we can't always be together. Daily contemplation. In what ways do you shy away from stating your own preferences with your friends, relatives, or significant other? How could more honesty improve your dynamic long term, even if social friction may increase temporarily? So Gevura is sometimes, for some of us, it's a matter of saying what's on our minds. And that alone can help establish somewhat of a space, a healthy space between us and others, even if it's painful at times, and we want to be approaching this with as much compassion and love as possible, as opposed to yelling at people. That's generally speaking the advice from the Skavura place. But how can that kind of openness and stating our needs, how can that help in the realm of Yesod, in the realm of connection and relationship? We have Hod of Netzach. So we have yielding within action. This is day 26. Preparing to go with the flow. Doesn't that sound like a bit of a contradiction? Preparing to go with the flow. Well, daily contemplation. Truly, our lives are overly structured, and never making plans is not the ideal response for most of us. If someone has a life where they can get by never making plans, like, way to go. All the power to you. But for most of us, that's not a viable option to live the lives that we want to lead here. So a balance can be struck. Special times we set aside to naturally unfold, abide, and listen in to what we are feeling called to in each moment. Do you have such times blocked off in your schedule? If not, pencil in a little go with the flow time right now. So it's yielding within action. It's waiting for the right moment to go with the flow. Is it possible to do that? The answer is yes. I mean, traditional Jewish weeks is like every week is Shabbat, that kind of thing. But if you don't have Shabbat, or for whatever reason, maybe you're not a Jewish practitioner, or maybe it doesn't work with where you are, what have you, finding a place to carve out time, to unfold, to be organic, to live in a way that's inherently nourishing and not planning based. Okay, we have a couple more here. Netzach of Hod, day 32. So that's the opposite. That was Hod of Netzach. This is Netzach of Hod. Action within yielding. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Daily contemplation. Jewish mystics call it running and returning, the process of encountering and then integrating spiritual experiences. These Kabbalists understand that constant forward movement is not sustainable. We must take time to come down and process our realizations. Do you ever feel like running forever towards the divine? What do you think about intentional, temporary cessation from your spiritual practices after a mystical moment? It's about integrating. What does it look like to have a sense of the gradual nature and of the ebb and the flow of our expansions and our integrations? Netzach of Hod, day 32. All right. Hod of Yesod, yielding within connection. 2 more samples. The transformative power of non-action. Daily contemplations. Silence is the most underappreciated relational skill, especially in long-term friendships and romantic relationships. Saying nothing at the right moment can build trust and, even more so, avoid needless conflict. When you're in a situation where your inner wisdom tells you not to speak, what part of you resists that? What does it want? If we can understand why we resist holding ourselves back, if we can, why do I have to say it? Why did I say that? Is a question you might ask yourself, perhaps. Why did I say that? Why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? That's something I hear. We all hear it sometimes. So the idea is, Hod of Yesod, that relationally connection can be built by intentionally not saying things. That's a part of the relational toolkit, Hod of Yesod. Finally, looking at this integration, the week 7, Shekhinah, receiving. Presence, prism, the all. These attributes are found in the Kabbalistic dimension of Shekhinah, i.e. Malchut. Functioning as the gateway to the full spectrum of the spiritual universe, this divine quality is the veil which separates our physical world from the beyond. It is often experienced as the deep richness of the moment. From the practitioner's perspective, connecting to the sephirot is an ongoing process we revisit in different ways throughout our spiritual journey. During the Omer, tapping into Shekhinah is about integrating the insights from the previous weeks. This can be done through intentional effort, but also through simply treating yourself well, because Shekhinah is associated with Shabbat, which is associated with delight. Unplug, delight your senses, and spend time with people you love. When contentment dawns, just allow it to be there and receive the gifts that it brings. So we have a path right there of actually feeling good on its own. That's Shekhinah week. And we can think about integrating individual aspects, but in so many ways, receiving is about coming to a place where we feel open, we feel good, and letting that flow. So thank you for receiving. If there's anything else you want to share, by all means, send it to tech support Emma, or you could send it to me right now. I wanted to let you know if there's people here who, have not seen the Path to Sephirot, have not bought it, you can learn all about it here. Oops, I'm going to put that out to everyone. And here it is in the chat, matthewponat.com/the path of the Sephirot. You can use that link to learn more about the book, to see the places where it can be purchased. But in essence, that's it. This is the preparation. The 49 gates are the 49 days. And I really believe that each of us has a piece in that, right? We can learn, we can grow, we can embody, we can make it our own. I'm very grateful to have the capacity to make a contribution to this lineage. And, if you have the book, or even just from the presentation, may it be a blessing to you. And may we help do tikun in the world together for the sake of all of us. So thank you for joining today. It's so nice to see all of you. And I wish you all the best. Please reach out if there's anything you would like to ask, to share, to revisit. If a question comes to you later, I'm totally open. info@makora.com. I put it out there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today. And if you're celebrating Passover, Pesach Sameach, hope you have a great holiday, and hope you have a great Omer counting season. Okay, blessings to each of you for tikkun and wholeness.